Okay, so yesterday we learned a Mishnah that indicates two rules regarding a wife who prohibits herself from benefiting from people. And the Mishnah actually had two sets of two rules, and we'll deal with both of them over the course of this morning's shir. So the first one is a wife prohibits herself from benefiting from people, and the two rules that we had were one that the husband is not able to revoke her neder. And the second is that the wife may benefit from leket, shechicha, and peya. So as a reminder, leket, shechicha, and peya are three different gleanings that are left for the poor. So the leket is if as you gather, things fall from your hand. So then as long as only a small number of items, one or two, fall from your hand. So then they are left for the poor to pick up. Shechicha is if you forget to cut in the first place one or two and you've passed that area. So then again, that is considered forgotten and left for the poor. And then finally, the peya, which is one of the things that are can be of any size. So then that also would be something that would be left for the poor where the corner is left. And so the Gemara then asked the question, I don't understand. These two rules seem to be in at least some degree in conflict, because the implication of the first one, right, the fact that the husband cannot revoke the neder, that suggests that the husband must be able to still feed her, because that's why he can't revoke the neder, because she hasn't effectively precluded herself from benefiting from anyone. She's just prevented herself from benefiting from anyone but the husband. And if the husband were included, well, then there'd be no sources of food for her and she would be stuck. On the other hand, the second piece of this, of leket, shechicha, and peya, suggests that she can benefit from those three items of tzedakah, but not necessarily from the husband directly. And of course, many of you are probably already anticipating or anticipated at the time when we went over it yesterday, that the idea of the different answers. So one of the answers, Ula's answer, is that the husband's not included in terms of the category of people generally, and in terms of the leket, shechicha, and peya, it's in addition, meaning in addition to the fact that the husband will have the right to feed her, so too she will have the right to take leket, shechicha, and peya. The second answer, which was Rava, is the one that the way I understood the Mishnah when I first read it, is that the reason that the husband is not able to annul the vow is because she's able to take leket, shechicha, and peya, and that's the explanation for why the husband's not able to revoke the vow, and so as a result, it's completely consistent. The husband's not able to revoke the vow because she can take leket, shechicha, and peya, so she's not totally afflicting herself. And as we saw over the course of the weekend, that all of the Mishnayos in this parak are according to Rabbi Yossi. So as a result, that's not considered affliction, because as long as she has some access to food, she's not totally afflicted. So now, and then the third answer, Rav Nachman, which is what we concluded with yesterday, was Rav Nachman said that really, like Ula said, really it's excluded. The husband is excluded from the group people. So as a result, when she says that she's not benefiting from any of, briot, any of the creation, any of people, so she's not including her husband in that. And so the husband does have the ability to feed her. And the reference to leket, shechicha, and peya is assuming that she gets divorced. And if she gets divorced, so then she'll be stuck with leket, shechicha, and peya. So those are the three different answers that we offered. And now we begin today by challenging the last of those answers, but really the challenge also applies to the first of the answers. And that is, as we pick up on Pei Dalet Amud Aleph. So Esvei Rava Rav Nachman, Rava asked Rav Nachman, I don't understand. So let me just scroll my screen. Rava asked Rav Nachman, and again, this can apply to Ula as well. Uval lav bechlal briosu. How can you say that when we say briot, we're not including the husband? V'hatanan, we have a Mishnah, and this is a Mishnah that we'll learn this coming weekend, I hope, that says, Netula ani min haYehudim. If a woman says, I'm going to be removed from the Jews, which we simply will understand as a reference to marital relations. So Yafer Chalko, the husband has the ability to revoke his piece of that. So Utehe Mishamashto, and so as a result, he will be able to engage, or she will be able to engage in marital relations with him. And yet she remains removed from all other Jews. She's unable to have marital relations with anybody else, meaning he's only revoking the part of the vow that refers to him, meaning that it's considered a vow between him and her. And as we've seen, the vows between him and her, between the couple, among the couple, so those he only revokes the piece that relates to himself. But when there's a vow that is, as we refer to, inui nefesh, where it is a self-afflicting vow for the woman, well, then he has the ability to revoke the entire vow. Now, in this situation, clearly the Mishnah that we just cited includes the husband in the prohibition. And yet, if you're going to say that when we have a general statement, the husband is not included in it, well, then nidri inu nefesh hein. This shouldn't be considered a neder of between her and him. It should be considered an inui nefesh neder. And as the Ran explains, the idea is that if the neder does not refer to sexual relations, well, then it must refer to eating and food and benefiting. And so as a result, if it's referring to benefiting and she's refusing to benefit from anyone other than her husband, so then that's going to be a problem. The yafer lola olam. That's a self-afflicting vow, and he should be able to revoke it forever. Everyone forever. So that's the question. How can you, Ula and Rav Nachman, say that you're saying that this that the reference to briot does not include the husband, when it seems clear from the Mishnah that we'll learn in a few days that it does include the husband, that is a general statement does include the husband. So Ein Malach, so Rav Nachman would say, and same with Ula, Shani Shiny Hachim, that the case over there, the case Hacha means here, but the case that we're referring to, the case of the woman who says that she's removed from the Jews, that's different. That the idea is that she is prohibiting herself from something, and the natural inclination or the natural understanding of this phrase, as the Ran explains, is the fact that it's referring to sexual relations. And so as a result, given the fact that she's already prohibited to have marital relations with anybody other than her husband, it's natural to understand this as adding something. And since we're adding something, it must include the husband. However, on the other hand, when it comes to our situation in our Mishnah, where it's clear that it's talking not about marital relations, but about benefiting in other ways, well, then we can have a general rule that general references to people will not include the husband. And so the bottom line is, according to Rav Nachman, general references to people does not include the husband unless the context makes clear that it must include the husband, because otherwise the neder has no meaning. So that is the question that's asked, and that brings us to the two dots. And so now the Mishnah said that what could the wife benefit from? And so she could benefit from leket shechcha and peya. And so as a result, the Gemara is going to note the fact that there are other forms of tzedakah that maybe she should be able to benefit from. V'lo katani uva maser ani. One of the things that the Mishnah did not mention is Meiser Ani. Well, why not? V'hatanya b'vraisa uva Meiser Ani. We actually have a brisa which is talking about the exact same topic, has the exact same language, except that it adds Meiser Ani as an additional category of tzedakah that she can access. So we're going to offer two answers to this question. The first is offered by Rav Yosef, which then Abaye will challenge, and the second answer is offered afterwards by Rava, and so as a result, we'll see that in fact there is an answer to the question. But let's take a look and see how Rav Yosef tries to answer it. So Amar Rav Yosef, lo kasha. There is no difficulty between this apparent inconsistency. Ha Rabbi Eliezer, ha Rabbanan, that we have a machlokus between the Tanaim, Rabbi Eliezer, and the Chachamim, and this machlokus plays out in between the Mishnah and the Brisa. So the Brisa, as we'll see, follows Rabbi Eliezer, and the Mishnah follows the Rabbanan. Ditnan, because we have another Mishnah. This is a Mishnah in Demai, and as a reminder, Demai is grain that is purchased from an Am Haaretz, somebody who is not knowledgeable of halacha, and there's a concern that the person may not have taken all the trumas and maestros that were necessary. So we'll see exactly what we're talking about as we go through the Mishnah. So Rabbi Eliezer says, "Ein adam tzarich likros shem al meiser ani shel demai," that there's no need for somebody to specifically set aside meiser ani from demai. Now, as a reminder, let's go through the meiser process. So the first thing that one takes is truma, and truma goes to the Kohen. Then one takes Meiser, and Meiser goes to the Levi. The Levi then takes 1/10 of that Meiser and gives it to the Kohen, and that is called Trumas Meiser. And then after the Trumas Meiser, or after the Truma has been taken, there is after the Meiser has been taken, there's something called Meiser Sheni or Meiser Ani in years 1, 2, 4, and 5 of the 7-year cycle. So then Meiser Sheni is taken, and that Meiser Sheni is then brought to Yerushalayim and eaten there. In years 3 and 6, instead, it is Meiser Ani that is separated, and that is given to the poor. And of course, in the 7th year, no trumas or maestros are given, as everything is allowed to lay fallow, and everything is open for anyone to take from anyone's field. So in any event, so the point is that now we're dealing with a situation where somebody buys a grain from a Am Haaretz, and what Rabbi Eliezer says is there is no need to take Meiser Ani from that grain, which is referred to as demai, because of the uncertainty. And the Ran helps us here and walks us through the entire process. So if we take a look on the bottom line of the Ran, where the Ran picks up, halokech mi Am Haaretz, if somebody buys from an Am Haaretz, somebody who's not knowledgeable of halacha, sorech la'aser, one needs to take meiser, ulitrom trumas meiser, and to take trumas meiser, because even an Am Haaretz knows that if one fails to take truma, that eating what is left is causes them to be chayev misa. So as a result, they'll always, and because truma can be even the smallest amount, there's no set volume to it. So even 1% or even 0.1% could technically be sufficient, even though we say that a generous person gives 1/40th, an average person gives 1/50th, and a stingy person gives 1/60th, but those are just suggested amounts. And so as a result, we're not worried that an Am Haaretz is not going to take Truma, but we are worried that they won't separate Meiser, which is 1/10, and therefore Trumas Meiser will be effectively mixed into their produce. And what happens to the Trumas Meiser? So uvinosna lekohen, and the Trumas Meiser needs to be given to the Kohen. Umeiser Rishon Gufei, as we turn to Pei Dalet Amud Bet again in the Ran, ma'akvo la'atzmo. But as for the Truma, as for the Meiser Rishon that the person takes, even though technically that should go to the Levi, because the situation of Demai is one of uncertainty, Achar Shehef Risho, he's allowed, even after he separates it, he's allowed to keep it, because Shahare Mutter Lazarim, because Meiser, the piece that goes to the Levium, is able to be eaten by non-Kohanim. So we have the concept of Hamotzi Mechavero Alav Haraya, that it's on the obligation is for the person who wants to take something, as we say in colloquial English legal language. Possession is 9/10 of the law. So as a result, if you want to take something away from somebody, you need to be able to prove that, in fact, that it belongs to you. But here with the demai, we're only uncertain about whether or not the Am Haaretz took the meiser. So motzi mechaveru av haraya shelo hefrisho Am Haaretz. You have the person, so a Levi who wants to try and get that meiser rishon will have to prove that he was that the Am Haaretz never took the meiser in the first place. Aval meiser ani. When it comes to meiser ani, and now this is the Ran explaining Rebbe Eliezer's position. Ein sarach lahafrish. There's no requirement to take it away. To svira leila Rebbe Eliezer, because according to Rebbe Eliezer, to afilu vadai shelo hifrisho min hakari. Even if you know for sure that meiser ani was never taken from the pile of produce, eino tovel. It's not considered tevel. Tevel is the word that's used to refer to the mixture of produce before trumas and meisers are taken. And so even though you've taken trumas and meisers, but you haven't taken meiser ani, that is not considered tevel according to Rebbe Eliezer. Shehei ochlo b'misa, which is subject to a penalty of death from heaven. So hilkach enu mafrisho masafik. So as a result, because it's not considered tevel, you don't have to take it away as a result of the uncertainty associated with demai. And so as we go back into the Gemara, so as we now pick up with the Gemara actually on the top of Pei Daled Amud, so that was the Rebbe Eliezer's position. V'chachamim omrim korashem. No, the Chachamim say no. You actually do need to separate meiser ani from the produce, and if you don't, it is considered tevel. The ein sarach lahafrish, but you don't need to separate it physically. Meaning, all you need to do is give it a name. And if we take a look at the first Tosfos in the outer right-hand column, it says korei shem umafrisho la'atzmo, meaning that the person can just separate it, this meiser ani, and keep it. To hamotzi mechaveru alav haraya. That's similar to the meiser rishon, where we say that because the Levi would need to prove that the Am Haaretz never took the meiser in the first place. Similarly, a poor person who wanted to try to access that meiser ani would need to prove in the first place that the meiser ani was never taken in the first place. To shema Am Haaretz hefrisho, as Tosfos concludes that maybe the Am Haaretz did in fact take it. So what do we see from this debate between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim? So what we see from this debate between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim is now we can tie this debate to dispute about whether or not the ability to specify the recipient of Meiser Ani is considered a benefit. So we're going to tie it as follows. So my lav, what would I assume is a piece of this debate between Rebbe Eliezer and the Chachamim? Leman de Amar Sveiko Tovel, that according to the Rabbanan, who say that you actually need to take Meiser Ani, because if you don't, it's considered Tevel. Well, then Kasavar Isle Tovas Hana. So it's a significant act that one is doing in connection with it is a significant act that one is doing in connection with the separating of Meiser Ani. It takes something from the concept of Tevel out of the concept of Tevel. And given its significance in that regard, but Kavan to Isle Tovas Hana. So as a result, we're going to say that the Kasavar Isle Tovas Hana, So we're going to assume that tied to that idea, and the Ran says that this may be just as a result of a Gzeira Shava, but the idea is that that the owner has the right to determine who gets it, and that right in and of itself is considered an asset, meaning the fact that I get to decide which poor person gets my tzedakah is a positive. It has positive value to me. The kaven to islay tovas hana. Well, if in fact it has positive value to me, well then lo mahanya. Then when the wife in our story, in our Mishnah, says that she's not going to benefit from anybody, well, then she can't take the Meiser Ani from me, because my giving her that Meiser Ani gives me a benefit. And so therefore, she's effectively benefiting from me. And so that is the position of the Chachamim. The Chachamim would be like our Mishnah, and that would be why our Mishnah does not mention Meiser Ani. However, on the other hand, Ulaman Damer Einu Kol Rishem, with respect to the one who says that it's not that designating Meiser Ani for Demai is not something that one needs to do. Kasavar Sveko Einu Tovel. So then he would say that in the situation of uncertainty, it's not considered Tevel. The Kol Shesveko Einu Tevel. And when we have a situation of taking something which would not be considered Tevel if we have an uncertainty, well, lace leg tovas hana. So that's not considered. It's not a significant action, and as a result of it not being considered a significant action, when I give my tzedakah to somebody, it's not considered as if I got really any benefit, and so as a result, the wife has the ability to take the benefit. To take Meiser Ani from somebody, the Shari Leila is the and so as a result, the woman who made the Neder in our Mishnah would be allowed to take it. And this explains why in the Brisa we do reference Meiser Ani, because the reference to Meiser Ani in our Brisa is actually Rebbe Eliezer. And Rebbe Eliezer says that that's a benefit, that's not a benefit. And so as a result, not a benefit to the giver. And so as a result, it's not considered a benefit received from the giver by the recipient. And so as a result, the woman is able to take even Meiser Ani. So now Abaye challenges this and says the following. So I don't understand. Maybe we can say that everybody is in agreement here that like the Chachamim, Amrle Abaye, Dekule Alma Sveiko Tova. Maybe really every one agrees that when we have a sense of uncertainty, the Meiser Ani is considered the failure to take Meiser Ani. When we have uncertainty about taking Meiser Ani, that what's left is considered Tevel, and therefore and therefore it's a material action, and therefore the woman's not allowed to benefit from it, and therefore we have a question as to why does the Brisa reference Meiser Ani while our Mishnah does not. Rebbe Eliezer, Rabbanan, and when it comes to Rebbe Eliezer and the rabbis, what they're arguing about is the following: Rebbe Eliezer savar lo nechshadu amei haaretz al Meiser Ani. That really Rebbe Eliezer is focused on the uncertainty associated with the Am Haaretz, and Am Haaretz is not is going to almost certainly take Meiser Ani. Why? Kevan de ilu mafker nechse v'havi ani b'shako lehu. So leisleip seda. So the answer is that anybody who's so selfish as to want to make sure that they get to keep their Meiser Ani, they have an easy path forward to keeping it. What they can do is simply take the separate the Meiser Ani, and then make all of their possessions hefker, and then take possession of the Meiser Ani as a poor person, and then take back all of their possessions. And there you have it. You still own everything that you owned before, and now you also got to keep your Meiser Ani. And so what's the big deal? Everybody can do that. And so as a result, even an Am Haaretz is going to be smart enough to know how to do that. And so as a result, there's no real concern that an Am Haaretz is going to fail to take Meiser Ani. The Rabbanan Sabri, and on the other hand, the rabbis disagree. The rabbis say the following. The rabbis say, no, an Am Haaretz would not want to make everything hefker. Nichse lo mafkerish. They don't want to make all their things hefker. Demirsas dilma zachi behu inish achrina. Maybe while the person is taking possession of their Meiser Ani, somebody else is going to come along and take possession of their other stuff. And so as a result, therefore, we're concerned that an Am Haaretz is not going to take Meiser Ani. And so that could be what the debate is between the Chachamim and Rebbe Eliezer. And that debate would have no bearing whatsoever on why a Brisa would mention Meiser Ani while our Mishnah would not. And so as a result, we need a new answer. And thankfully, Rava comes to the rescue with a new answer. And so Rava suggests the following. So Rava Omer Khan b'maiser ani hamischale b'toch habayis diksiva be Nesina, that when it comes to Meiser Ani that a person gives when they're in their own house, there the Torah references it as a giving. V'nasata l'levi lager. You give it to the Levi, to the ger, to the orphan, to the widow, etc. And so Mishum Hachi Aser Leila is Hanuye. So as a result, that is a situation where the owner of the object, the owner of the field, is going to get the direct benefit because they are in their house, and Ani comes to the house, and they get to decide which Ani is going to get it. And so that's the situation where we say that that because the woman has now prohibited herself from benefiting from others, so she can't take that Meiser Ani. She can't take Meiser Ani that's given within the house. And that's the story in our Mishnah. Our Mishnah is talking about Meiser Ani that's given from a person's home. But Khan, in the Brisa, the Meiser Ani hamischalik b'toch hagranos. On the other hand, when you're at the granary, when basically you're about to put the food into storage, and so as a result, there's not going to be anything, there's not going to be another opportunity to give it away. Well, then Kevan Diksiv Bay Vahanach Vihinachta Bisharecha, you have to leave it in your gates. And so the idea is that when you're on your way to your granary to store it, you can't take it with you, and you can't put it in there. And so as a result, you need to just make it hefker and allow any poor person to take it. And so as a result, because any poor person can take it, even without the owner's consent, so shari leila is haynuye. So that's the situation in the brisa, and that's the situation where the wife who says that she's not going to benefit from anybody is allowed to take Meiser Ani, because that isn't considered benefiting from anyone, because it's really available to any poor person and not going to be specified by the owner, by the original owner of the produce. And so now we've come up with the explanation of why our Mishnah does not include Meiser Ani, because it's talking about where somebody is giving the Meiser Ani from their home. And the Brisa does talk about Meiser Ani because that's talking about a situation where a person is giving Meiser Ani at the granary. Okay, so now we'll conclude by asking, by looking at starting to look at the second set of cases in our Mishnah. So Kohanim Uleviim Nehanin Li Yitlu. So if somebody were to say, the second set of cases began with someone making a neder not to allow any Kohanim and Leviim to benefit from him, and so in that situation, the Kohanim and Leviim are allowed to take Truma and Meiser against the will of the person who made the vow. On the other hand, at the end of our Mishnah, the second of the cases in the second set of cases in our Mishnah involved if the neder related only to certain Kohanim and Leviim. And in that situation, other Kohanim and Leviim should take the Truma and Meiser. So we're going to pose a question that the implications, just as the question that we began with today, there are that we actually began with yesterday, right after the Mishnah, just as that question highlights the implications of two statements, and those implications conflict. Similarly, we're going to show that the two statements that we just made with respect to a neder about all Kohanim and Leviim, enabling Kohanim and Leviim to take Truma against the will of the owner and Meiser against the will of the owner, whereas when you make it about only certain Kohanim and Leviim, so then those Kohanim and Leviim are prohibited, but others can. So what is the implication of the first part of the statement? Alma tovas hana eina mamon. Look, the bottom line is it must be, if this vow is a valid vow, and at the moment we're assuming that it is, well then, if I were to say that no Kohanim and Leviim could benefit from me, but now the Kohanim and Leviim take the Truma and Meiser against my will, they still have benefited from me if in fact we consider the right of the ability to give a gift as some kind of financial of having some kind of financial value. So it must be from the first statement of these two statements. It must be that does not have any value, and that is why the Kohanim and Leviim can take it against my will. But Ema Seifa, what about the end of our Mishnah? And the end of our Mishnah says that if I limit it to just certain Kohanim Elu Uleviim Elu Nehanin Li Yitlu Acherim. If I limit it and say that certain Kohanim and Leviim can't benefit from me, well, then other Kohanim and Leviim should be the ones who take the Truma and Meiser. Avalahani lo. But these ones, the implication is that these particular ones that I have vowed against, they cannot take the Truma and Meiser. Well, that implies Alma Tovas Hanam Mamon. That implies that, in fact, presumably the reason that they can't take it is because doing so, even if they take it against my will, is effectively benefiting from me. And so as a result, how do we square this circle? There seems to be a conflict between the first statement and the second statement. And with that, so what's the answer to this apparent inconsistency? For that, I ask that you please stay tuned for tomorrow's daf.
Yasher Kov, have a great trip.
Thank you so much. Again, tomorrow we'll be on Zoom. Look forward to being back on my laptop, so hopefully it'll be a little bit easier to follow. I hope that all was visible and on your screens, and looking forward to continuing our learning together.
I personally have a scheduling conflict, but I look forward to coming on later in the day to watch a recording.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So the recording will probably be circulated on Thursday morning, but feel free to try to check in earlier, because hopefully it'll be on our website even earlier.
Are you talking about the Buy It website?
Yes. I think that's where they have it all posted, so that way you don't have to wait necessarily for the email, which comes around every morning.
No, what I do is I go to YouTube, and then from within YouTube, to just type in Buy It Daf Yomi.
Oh, that's awesome. I didn't even know you could do that. Terrific. Thank you for teaching me something new.
But right, like yesterday, I also had a scheduling conflict, but then it was never uploaded.
Okay. Well, the reason that it wasn't uploaded yesterday is because the office staff wasn't in the office yesterday. So it should be up. Exactly. So it should be uploaded sometime later today. Okay. Have a wonderful day. Thank you so much, everybody.